talking to you from the Manchester Evening News. My name is Joe Bray, and today we are talking the Premier League title, 4 in a row for Manchester City. Now, Simon Bajkowski joining me. We said the other day when we were talking about predictions, you said it'd be a 4-0 stroll. I said a comfortable 3-2, and I think we were both right because it was looking like it was going to be a walk in the park, didn't it? As soon as Phil Foden scores that goal early on, and then a couple of things happen, and it's a bit of nerves. But by the end, it was relatively comfortable, and City got the job done.
It was very nearly exactly as you called it, Joe. If Souček had that handball sort of not spotted, I don't know how you wouldn't have spotted it. But, West Ham did have the ball in the net to make it 3-2 at the end, which would have made for a nervy few minutes. Maybe the people who were encroaching onto the pitch might have had to go back into the stand. I don't know. But those Foden goals quickly kind of took away the nerves. They came back a bit when Kudus scored that goal, but a convincing enough afternoon for City to make them champions for the 4th year in a row.
Yeah, because Guardiola was talking up it's going to be like Aston Villa 2 years ago. It's not all going to go City's way, and there was probably 15 minutes either side of half time where West Ham scored and Arsenal had gone behind, but then levelled, and City was still in complete control. But you could feel the nerves around because I think fans had gone expecting to be nervous at some point, but when Foden scores after 76, 78 seconds, it was a party atmosphere, and then he scores number 2, and it was. There's been a lot of talk of inevitability, but as soon as Foden sort of shifts that ball onto his left and looks at the top corner, that felt inevitable. And I personally haven't heard a noise like that at the Etihad for a long time. Just that release of sheer joy and relief and amazement that Foden has done this again. And in his season, his Player of the Year season, he's sort of taken the responsibility, and it was a stunning goal. Doku sets up the second one, and it's all going well, but it felt like this was a team who were ready to take responsibility. They've had the nervous finals and final days in the past. This team were like, no, we're just going to do it, and we're not going to give the drama that other teams want.
Yeah, and that has been symptomatic of Foden's season, really. He has been the one that said, no, I'm going to step up. I'm going to drag City over the line. I am going to make them win games. And the first goal was a textbook Foden goal. I think
it's not a bad trademark to have, is it?
No. I think
hammering it in the top corner against United, against Real Madrid on the final day.
Yeah, 6th in the league from outside the area this season, which is just tremendous. And yeah, I think it was a bit of a surprise that he played so centrally, because he has been out wide more in recent matches, but Guardiola bringing Doku in and playing Doku on the left, which there was no guarantee over. But, having Foden central, and it took, 70 seconds for him to make his mark and just smash the ball in. And, there's probably doesn't get better for City than, a local boy leading them to the title.
This is it. They've had Aguero being the hero, Ilkay Gundogan. Those players are in City folklore, but Foden is different. I think Noel Gallagher said it exactly what you just said there. It is different because he is a local lad, and he's come through the academy, and here he is giving City the title. And we will remember 2022 for Gundogan, 2012 for Aguero. This one will be the Foden game, I think, because he was that good, and he has been that good all season. Let's talk about that tactic change, because when the team comes out, there's a few looks around the press box, aren't there, of you don't change a winning team, but that's exactly what he's done. He's taken Kovacic out and he's put Doku in, which is not Grealish. He's chosen Doku over Grealish, which is a big call, but also Doku is a very attacking player. West Ham are going to go deep, and it wasn't clear how he would line them up. Would it be Foden on the wing and Bernardo Silva in midfield? As it turned out, he played Foden and De Bruyne as double number 10s. It was a little bit of a risk to change things up after going 8 or 9 games unbeaten and settling on Kovacic as the number 8, and now suddenly you've only got one number 8, one number 6 even.
Yeah, it felt sort of like why tinker with a winning formula. City had kind of seen settled for the final games of the season, and it was like, oh, is it right? And also like, where does Doku play? Does he play on the right? Does he play on the left? Does he play a bit in the middle where he's done sometimes? And it was a big ask for Doku as well because he's sort of been used, excuse me, largely from the bench. He's been used, and would he have the same impact from the start? And I don't want to say that Doku was used against West Ham because he played really well at West Ham in the reverse fixture, but when you know how much City plan for the opposition, and Guardiola said it afterwards how he hadn't been able to find Liverpool's weaknesses under Klopp. Like City have found where West Ham's weaknesses were, and in the reverse game, it was Jeremy Doku tearing Kufal and everyone else apart on that left flank. So while it may have been a bit of a surprise to see him in the starting lineup, once the game starts and Doku starts being unplayable from the left, it's then kind of like, yeah, as much as you don't want to change a winning formula, if your tactic is play to the opposition weaknesses and where you can exploit that, then it made more sense than it might have done an hour before kickoff.
It's been an interesting season, hasn't it, for Doku? Because his debut wasn't amazing. Then he goes and does that at West Ham. He scores loads of goals early on. I remember him coming on at Leipzig and winning the game, and he gets the 4 assists against Bournemouth. And you're thinking this is a serious player here. And then it tails off a bit. I don't think he gets another assist until Christmas time, if I'm right. And you've got Cole Palmer doing his thing at Chelsea, and there's all those comparisons. It took him a while to, after dropping out of the team, to find a way back into it. But then he comes on at Anfield to calm things down, and it weirdly works. He's been a real useful player in the running, and then he gets a clever assist. I thought he justified his inclusion, and again to start ahead of Grealish on the final day maybe shows that Grealish has less rhythm in his legs and less form this season, but it's a pretty strong justification of his season and how much he's progressed because Guardiola doesn't throw anyone in on a final day where you've got to win. He's got to trust those players completely, and for Doku to do that and win that trust, and I mean Guardiola behind him, that left flank is typical of what City have done this season with players coming through and pushing others. But Doku, I thought, was very good again and has been these last few weeks and sort of an unsung hero in the title race.
Yeah, he definitely has been, and it's easy to forget his age. I think he's only 21 still. Having
He's,
said, it's easy to
I think,
forget his
3 weeks
age.
different to Cole Palmer in terms of age.
Yeah, but you saw it with the second goal. Like Rodri plays Guardiola into a bit of trouble, and the feet from Guardiola are just absurd for a left back, never mind a centre back. And he gets City out of trouble. It's a really cute pass from Haaland out to Doku. Doku finds Foden in the middle of 3 players, and Foden tucks the ball away. Like all 4 players that made that goal, 23 or under, it is like that right there is a sensational City future. And Doku and Gvardiol have both sort of established themselves in this team in their first season, which is really impressive. And both have gone through spells where they didn't particularly look like they would, but they've both come through when it mattered, and they've come through in the most high pressure games. I still remember Doku at Anfield coming on when City were under the cosh and Kovacic and Doku came on, and everyone's thinking, why is he bringing Doku on if he wants control? But it worked because Doku did his role perfectly. And it, never underestimate how good somebody has to be to get what Guardiola wants from them quickly, because it's not easy. And for Doku to do that shows immense football intelligence. Like there were questions about his sort of output when he arrived at the club, and he probably still has to improve that. But he's got far more chance of improving that if he can show the intelligence that he has.
I think, yeah, a couple of years ago, if Guardiola had done that and dropped Kovacic, who's a steady player and has played very well, and is another player who's come in this year, and he's in a different part of his career, but has slowly over the season adapted to exactly what Guardiola wants. for Guardiola to drop him and bring in a more maverick player on the wing when all City fans wanted was just a bit of reassurance. I think if that had happened a couple of years ago, it would have been a sort of a pep roulette and a overthinking and all those sort of worries would come back. But it just wasn't the case, and especially after he gets the assist, and he just played very well throughout. And Foden will rightly get the headlines, but I think Doku was again an unsung hero on the final day. It means that City have won 4 in a row, and Guardiola said it's ignited something in the squad around about March, April time, because they knew that history was on the cards. I think we'd seen it throughout the season, but we've been reminded that on the walls of the training ground it says no team has ever won 4 consecutive titles yet. So those players have seen that every day. That's been the motivation all season, and now they've done it. And Guardiola was saying, Liverpool fans will think that their team of the Shankly and Paisley eras are the best. United fans will think the Sir Alex Ferguson eras are the best, but City fans think that this one is the best, and no team can argue with that record. No team's done it, and that history, that chance to make history and set records has really motivated this side, hasn't it? And they are now, they've not got the longevity of those sides, but they are now on a par with the best teams we've ever seen in England, because they've done something that no one else has ever done.
Yeah, and I mean that sign, which you might read about on the website if the piece ever gets published, but kind of important to say that sign was Guardiola's doing and went up in the October international break. So right after City had lost to Newcastle, City had lost to Wolves, they'd beaten RB Leipzig, and then they'd gone to Arsenal and lost. So 3 defeats in 4 games. And the players head off on international duty, and Guardiola thinks, what do I need to do for these players when they return? I'm going to stick that sign up. I'm going to get everyone in the boot room, and I'm going to tell them, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to think about. This is why we're champions. This is what we need to go again. And that shows just how good Guardiola is, not just at the tactical elements of the game, but at man management, at knowing what makes these players tick and what will motivate them across a long, tiring season. And he was pretty broken, I thought, when he spoke to us at the end of Sunday. He'd given a load of interviews, he'd been on the pitch for ages, and he spoke about how he doesn't know how he will find the motivation to go again next year. But he also said when he is back next year with the players, he is sure that they will find the motivation, because they always do. And that is a perfect example this year, because he said after Istanbul, he was like, how do we top it? How do we go again? What's left to do? But by October, he'd already found something genius that would excite and ignite the players for the rest of the season. The players have had an elite mentality, but you really can't get away from just how good, how Guardiola is one of the best of all time.
And it's so simple, isn't it? It's just saying, this is what's on offer, go and get it. But they did it last year. They had a picture of the Champions League trophy of saying this is the target in the physio room and where they get the treatments.
Yeah.
It's just a visual reminder. And I mean, if any of those players are like, everyone goes to work and thinks, I can't be bothered today. If anyone's getting the boots on and thinking, I've not got that little edge that I need, you're going to look at that and think, yeah, go on, that will do. And he knows these players, as you say, inside out. And we heard from the start that Grealish and Foden were saying, how do we top a treble? Let's win 4. Was it Kyle Walker saying that he wants to win 4 in a row, but he also wants to win the trophies for the players who haven't won it yet? And it feels like every step of the way, even if there were setbacks where they didn't win the Community Shield, which Grealish really wanted, or they didn't win the treble, they really wanted the Club World Cup, for example, and that motivated them through. They really wanted, I think they need a target of a trophy and to make history as well. It's not just that they've got to win, it's that they've got to win and set a record and be better than everyone else. And clearly Guardiola knows that and gets the best out of them. And it'd be interesting to see what he did say in his meeting beforehand, because he told us that he was going to show them how good they are, whether it was a video or I don't know what it was. I'm sure we will find out at some point, but he knows that sometimes it's not about tactics, it's just about letting these players do what they can do. And as he said, no team will ever do this again, or at least these players will never have the chance to do that again. And it seems like that really works. But I would say as well, there was a time in that game against West Ham where the levels dropped a little bit, and you could see the nerves that came out in the second half, and it was like they were so near but so far. And the City fans, there was a chant of "Come on, City" and the best team in the land, and it wasn't a general get behind the team. It was, "Come on, guys, you've got this, and you can do it." And then suddenly they put dozens of passes together, and Rodri slots it in the bottom corner, and the relief is there all over again. And then there's Poznans and pitch invasions and all of that, and it just seems like there's that connection between the players, the manager, and the fans as well. And this is why we're going to talk about it in a bit, that there's criticism of City, but this is such a winning unit that they have, and I think it all just came together on Sunday, because it's probably not the best City team that Guardiola's had, but they are winners, and there's a resilience there that they might not have had before, because they might not have won that game in the past, but they were never going to lose it. I think on Sunday, even when it went tough, when it went against them.
Yeah. They just. It is an amazing ability to be able to go again and again and again. And it doesn't feel like City have been at the best this season, but then they haven't lost a game since the start of December. It's an incredible run. And, I think part of it is normalised brilliance. I think part of it is kind of, they've been a lot more individual this season, and they've also kind of needed to come from behind a lot more than in previous seasons, and that's probably summed up in sort of the game at St James's Park in January, when they're 2-1 down and probably deserving to lose the game at that point, and then De Bruyne comes on and scores from nowhere, and then comes up with an incredible assist that produces an incredible goal from Oscar Bob, who, the goal has come from nowhere, the assist has come from nowhere. Both players have come from nowhere, basically, because De Bruyne has been on the treatment table for 5 months and Bob's barely played. And things like that were doing it for City. And it was only really after the March international break that we saw more of the City team that we are used to seeing in the league. But the league table never lies. You are where you are after 38 games. And, as much as City kind of came into themselves in the final 9, they did enough in the other 29 to get where they needed to be.
That sounds like a good place to lead into what we're going to talk about after the break, which is how they won the title and where they won it, and the specific games that stand out. So you've taken a bit of my talk about Newcastle out of my mouth, but that's fine. We'll be back after a short break to discuss that game and all the other just important ones that contributed to the 4th title in a row. Welcome back to the Talking City podcast. We're just talking about the win at Newcastle, the last-minute goal from Oscar Bob, and City won the league by 2 points and had an inferior goal difference. So if Bob doesn't score that, City don't win the league. And there's not many other individual moments you can really point to as that was the time that it turned, because there weren't many last-minute winners. I mean, last year there was the one against Fulham at home after City played with 10 men for so long. There was a few different moments where you could say that is where they won those points. They're not quite the same this season, apart from that Newcastle game. You can obviously point to Arsenal at home, where Arsenal were quite happy with a point and are probably less happy with a point now. But are there any games, including Newcastle, that stand out as you like, this in hindsight is a very, very important one for where the title ended up?
I think the biggest game was probably Luton away in December, whereby City came into Luton away on a run of 4 winless games, which was their worst run in the league since Guardiola's first season in charge. And they've been beaten in midweek by Aston Villa 1-0, and I cannot remember City being comprehensively played off the park as they were against Villa. It was a schooling, and I think City were down to fourth, and it kind of, you spoke to Guardiola after the game, and he said, "It's my job to motivate him, but I don't know how."
He said they were struggling, didn't they? They were in trouble.
Yeah, yeah. And then at Luton, they played really well in the first half. They played well, obviously without Erling Haaland for the first time, who sort of that was the first game of his kind of 2 month absence. And they looked pretty good. And then they just switched off on the edge of half time, and Luton scored, and they were 1-0 down again. And at half time, winless in four, 1-0 down away at Kenilworth Road, you're thinking, yeah, this is a real test for them. And they came back to win it with, Bernardo Silva was very good, Phil Foden was very good, Julian Alvarez was very good, Jack Grealish was very good, actually. They came back to win 2-1, and, Pep afterwards spoke about how they'd played knowing they could lose. They'd had that feeling that they could lose. And, they'd also had a players' meeting after Aston Villa where they'd said, we need to, we can't be the victims. We can't play the excuse card of, we've had some silly goals go in or whatever. Like, we have to stop doing this, and we have to just turn it around immediately. And they did. And, it wasn't straightforward or linear from there. But again, there was enough change, helped both by the Club World Cup going away to Saudi Arabia and that kind of break that felt like, and winning another trophy, and also the January break in Abu Dhabi, where they sort of specialised on set piece work. But that Luton game was really a big turning point in the season.
And it didn't necessarily feel like it at the time. So am I right in thinking it was Crystal Palace after that where they threw away the 2-goal lead and it
Yeah,
suddenly won winning 6, and you're thinking, the step forward you made against Luton, it's now a step back or sideways, and they went away to that Club World Cup. I think the ones I'd point to, as well as I think the Club World Cup is an incredibly important part in turning the season around after that run and just getting everyone together. And Kevin De Bruyne's there, but he's not playing, and Haaland's there, but it's just getting that squad feeling. And I think they needed essentially like a pre-season tour within the season, but also the validation of you are the best in the world, and winning that final so comfortably as well, against a very good Fluminense side. The two games I'd point to aren't Premier League games. I think Tottenham away in the Cup was a really big win to shake that record, show that they can score. And by that point, they knew if they got to the Cup semi-final, they would almost certainly have to play Tottenham in the last week of the season. So knowing that they could go to Tottenham and win and keep a clean sheet, and that they were still in the FA Cup, I think was really important for the league, and keep that sort of momentum that they built at the Club World Cup over Christmas into January. And then I'd say the Chelsea game as well, after going out of the Champions League in such sort of heartbreaking fashion, and they'd played so well, they'd had so many shots, but lost. To go there on no energy, on zero, players saying that they're playing injured and it's unacceptable and they're not happy to play. But they went there, they played probably the worst they played all season, but they won, got themselves into a cup final. It just kept that winning run going, and it made sure that the treble might have been over, but the double was still on. If they'd gone from potentially winning 3 to just winning 1, I think that would have been a massive blow, and I'm not sure they would have gone and won the Premier League. But because they won that, I think the momentum was really valuable. So there aren't many league games that you look at and think this was a really important one. Obviously, Tottenham last week was title winning, but before that, I think it's more moments and shifts of momentum that I think are more important, rather than in the past they've gone to Liverpool and won, and they've sort of beat Liverpool at home and big wins against United, but the record against the rivals was pretty poor. That Arsenal game at home at the time, now it looks a lot different, doesn't it? And Arsenal will feel they could have gone for it more. Rodri has said that was the game where they realised they could win, because they knew that Arsenal's mentality was to go out and play for a draw. So they knew that if you give us a run, you've given us that sort of weakness, we're going to prey on it. It was quite damning comments from Rodri, but it just shows, yes, Arsenal got 89 points, brilliant side, but they need that extra bit of edge, don't they, to catch City.
Yeah, it's upset a lot of Arsenal fans, and
Well, they were so happy at the draw, so you can understand.
Yeah, and they should be happy at the draw, and they should be happy at 4 points. Like I think we said at the time that it's not how City have won titles. You don't win titles by being happy to settle for draws against the best teams, because Arsenal were happy to settle for a draw at the Emirates against City as well and scored via a deflection. So like they were 2-0 basically. They just got a goal in one of them. But and I can completely see why Arsenal fans wouldn't want the 0-0 turning into a big part of their season, because it's not. But it's a big part of City's season, because City, after the March international break, they had Edison injured. Edison was injured. Walker and Stones had got injured on international duty. Nathan Ake had to come off during the game, and they were up against it. They were, Tyson Fury on the ropes, waiting for that knockout punch to come, and it never came. And despite what Arsenal like Arsenal fans may disagree, but it was huge for City's mentality and momentum at that moment to not lose and to see it, their big, a big title rival have the chance to, deliver that knockout blow and not doing so. It kept them in the race. They were third, but it kept them in it. And momentum is huge, and you just can't underplay its importance in the final stages of the title race. Arsenal did not lose the title because they drew 0-0 at City, but City won their last 9 games because they didn't lose against Arsenal. If Arsenal don't lose to Villa a few games later, then they still win the title. But City probably still win their final 9 games because they still had that belief and that hunger that they could do it, and they weren't up against an unstoppable opponent who was sweeping all opponents, including themselves, before them. So it gave City that final springboard to pick themselves off the ropes, off the canvas, whatever, and go again. And as much as it was a good point for Arsenal, it turned out to be a better point for City because of what they were able to do off the back of it. I think whatever team lost the league would point to their run of form in December, because City won 1 in 6 around November, December, and Arsenal had a poor run of form in December. That's the reason. But like City would point to that, but if Son had scored against Tottenham, you'd still point to that as well and say, well, that moment was important, and the 0-0 draw might have been a step of progress for Arsenal, but it also kind of gave City an extra edge that they needed to win their final 9 league games. And in the same way that City wouldn't have got 91 points if Arsenal hadn't got 89. We saw after City had won the league a few games early last season, I think they got 1 point from the final 6. So they actually got more points this season. But if the title was still on the line, you're not telling me that they draw at Brighton and lose at Brentford. Like they would have won both games. So if City had won a bit earlier this season, or if Arsenal had beaten City at the Etihad and gone more than a win ahead of them, City aren't coming back from that, and they're not winning the last 9 games. But it gave them the belief and the hunger to go. So it sort of, I can see why it wasn't that big in Arsenal season, but it was pretty big for City.
It was interesting that Rodri basically said that they basically showed us the blood that we could smell, and we had that thing to go on. And Guardiola didn't talk about that result, but he did say that he knew that City had a chance to win the title on the day that Liverpool and Arsenal both lost at home, and he was like, "This will not happen again. We'll not get this chance again. We've now got it in our hands. We've got to go and do it." So it's interesting that that's how they see it. And I mean, Guardiola was claiming fouls and free kicks and urging his players on until the 93rd, 94th minute yesterday. He knows it's not over until it's absolutely over. I think it was like just about 30 seconds before the whistle was blown, that he allowed himself to turn around and sort of give a little fist pump to his family in his box up in the stands. That was the only time he allowed himself to go, yeah, go on, we're champions now, because he knew everything could change, and he knew how good Liverpool for most of the season and Arsenal for all of the season were as well. So it's just that ruthless mentality as well, and I think the experienced City know how quickly it can change, and know everyone says, City are good, City are always going to win the title, but they know it's not as simple as that. They know how much work they put in and the mentality you need to do that as well.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of talk about how inevitable City's title win was. What odds would you have got on that April Sunday afternoon of Liverpool losing their first league game at Anfield since I think October 2022, and then hours later Arsenal lose their first game of 2024? Those
Against a
things.
very good Aston Villa side as well.
Yeah, but it's those are the moments that do make you think, wow, that's big, something could happen here. And for City, it was the moment that, like you say, they said, right, well, this opportunity may not come along again, because again, how unlikely was it for that to happen? And yet it happened. So, these football teams do everything in their powers to avoid the unexpected happening. And when it happens and it works out in your favour, you have to do everything in your power to avoid anything unexpected happening again. And that's why Guardiola on the final day was still going until injury time, because he desperately didn't want anything such as a West Ham player scoring a worldie with an overhead kick or anything like that. So it was really important for City that kind of April day to, again, just to focus their minds on, this is what can happen. But then also a few days later, they went out on penalties to Real Madrid. So, like you say, that Chelsea game was huge for picking them up again. It has required amazing mentality from everyone at the football club to drive themselves over the line ahead of, a really good Liverpool team and a really good Arsenal team.
But again, it points to the fact we're not talking about individual massive wins. It's a sort of movements and feelings and changes in direction that have won this title. And I think, again, I'll go back to the experience, and City players know exactly what is needed and what isn't, and Guardiola knows any slip up could be costly, so you just can't afford to do it. And I think we've seen a lot of seasons and a lot of experience coming together for this title win. We'll be back after a short break, and I mean, Pep was a little bit emotional after the game. He was crying about Jurgen Klopp, and he also spoke about his future, which we'll touch on a little bit, and look ahead to the FA Cup final. Hi there, welcome back to the Talking City podcast. Before we get into talk of Pep's future and the FA Cup final, there is a end of season supplement celebrating City's 4 titles in a row and potentially an FA Cup trophy as well. You can buy that now. You can pre-order it online. You'll be able to find details of that on the Manchester Evening News website. And as we look ahead to the Cup final, we'll have a joint podcast with our colleagues who cover Manchester United to get both sides of the rivalry ahead of that final. I believe that is on Friday, so you will not be short of content and analysis and previews of the Cup final, and then also a bit more in-depth look at the season as it's gone on. I've gone through every month and written 1,000+ words on what happened every month, so I hope there's nothing that has been missed in that, just to go back over the season, those little things that you've probably forgotten, and the twists and turns and the like. Pep took his time to come and see us in the press room, which is understandable given the celebrations on the pitch and all the many interviews. And by the time he'd arrived to speak to us, he told Sky Sports that he was not entirely sure in his future. He's closer to saying bye than staying, and some have interpreted that as, oh my God, he's leaving now. as we look at it, it probably means he's closer to leaving at the end of his contract in 2025 than signing another one. I think he said to Match of the Day a bit clearer. He's closer to saying no, I'm going to call time next summer. But then he also spoke about his motivation and what would keep him there and that sort of thing. He's always going to be emotional after a game like that, but it was quite interesting to hear him talk like that. And we're now within the last year of his contract, and that is going to be a massive talking point again.
Yeah, thanks. We're all thankful for it. Yeah, he's always been this way. I remember when he signed an extension in 2018 after winning the league with 100 points, and he signed to 2021, which would take him to 5 years, one more than Barcelona. And he got asked about it on tour, preseason tour in the US, and he was kind of like, well, maybe, but it depends on results and the future. Like, you never know. We can't talk about what's going on in 3 years' time when we've got 3 years worth of events to happen. And some people talk this like, oh my God, he's not committing his future to City. Why isn't he committing his future? He's saying he could leave before 2021. And it's like, yeah, it's just the kind of guy he is. And it's funny because all season, really, he's given off the air of someone who has got more energy. Certainly the second half of the season, he's got more energy, and he's talked about how he's sort of more efficient as a manager. And in the context of Jurgen Klopp leaving, because he's tired, he said, "Yeah, I could understand that because I had that at Barcelona. I don't have that now." And that didn't mean that he was going to stay forever, but it opens the door that he could extend beyond 2025 if he still feels like he's in this perfect environment. He looked shattered on Sunday, like really shattered. He looked like you would do like at the end of a marathon, which is what a Premier League title is. He's been going and going and going and being strong for his players and strong for everyone the whole season, and then it's over, and you suddenly realise how much energy it's taken out of you. And I thought it was also very honest of him, to say like, I don't know what will motivate me next year. I don't know what brings me back next year other than my contract. But at the same time, I know that once I get back to next year, to the next season, we'll go again because it's just what we do. And it's what Guardiola does. He could have been happy at 3-1 to City with 20 minutes to go in the season. He wasn't. He was still pushing and barking orders, and like, this is a guy, he might enjoy some time off when he leaves City, but he might not. He might just crack straight on. It's very hard to believe that he won't manage again after City, and he will want to be in a position where he can give that his all. But he's still got so much to give, because he just has this amazing work ethic and mentality. And all these players are champion, and right, they're signed for their mentality as much as anything else. But they all admit, like, Pep is the one. Pep has more than any of us, and he brings us on that one step further. So yeah, I think it was probably his not so great English that caused a few to think that he might be off this summer. But he's I think that is just largely wishful thinking from people who want to see him leave so City won't win the league again. I think it's fair to say that, as we've said for a while, 2025 looks like the most likely exit date for him. However, it will depend on how everything goes. And I think we will be sat here next season talking about how Guardiola has energised City and driven them on to new heights again. And if he's enjoying himself, then, it's not out of the question that he turns a 9-year stay into 10.
This is it. It's easy to look at a guy who's absolutely shattered and probably isn't thinking completely straight given everything that's gone on. He's just won the title. He's, as we say, but he's been going 100 miles an hour until the 90th minute. Then you've got sudden celebrations. He was coaching Erling Haaland in the tunnel before they came out and got the medals. He's that kind of guy. Then he's got to do a million interviews. he says similar things to each one, and he's getting the same questions, and he just wants to go and relax with his family. And yeah, he was in tears talking about Jurgen Klopp. I'm not sure he would have been in tears on another day after a normal result. I think it was just the emotion of it as well. But yeah, you piece together his comments at different places, and I think it's clear what he meant as well. But it's
Yeah,
all similar. Sorry, go on.
but also you look for consistency, and this is entirely consistent with what he's done throughout his 8 years. He signed a 3-year deal in 2016. In 2018, he signs an extension. He signs an extension, and then it's in the November of the final season where he agrees. And then again, it's the November of the final season of his contract where he agrees. Like, when he does leave, he will leave with enough time so that City can find a successor. And how public it is made, sort of when, remains to be seen. But there will be enough time for Manchester City to go out and get the person that they want to replace him. But at the same time, if he doesn't want to leave, he will extend. So, like, we will know in good enough time, but it will be on his timescale, because he doesn't want to spend months and years thinking about these things. He wants to come to a point, whether that's October, November, December, and think about, where he wants to be. He did it at Bayern before he joined City. I think it was December when he decided to leave, or announced that he was leaving there. So, this is just how he works. So I don't think people can have any doubts that he will continue next year, and that at some point next year, probably towards the end of the calendar year, so like 6 months, something like that, there will be a decision, and we will find out whether he is extending or whether he's leaving.
This is it as well. He said the day on Friday before the game, he was like, "I'm going to stay. I've got a contract," and he's always said he will honour his contract, whatever league they're in. When he's speaking about the charges, and I think City fans can be fairly confident that he's not going anywhere. And he always says, if the club want to move me on, they can do that. But he honours those contracts, and I think that's why he spends so much time thinking about them and making sure that it's the right decision for him and the club, because he doesn't want to stop halfway through. And this isn't a criticism of Jurgen Klopp, but that's what Klopp has done, really. He's decided, no, I've not got enough, and it works for Liverpool because he's leaving on his own terms, and he's had the send-off that keeps his legacy there intact. But I think Guardiola would do it slightly differently and make sure it's at the end of a contract rather than the start. Now, his contract is it runs out next summer. We're sort of expecting a decision potentially on those charges. Could it be just a convenient time to say, we've had a good run, we've won everything, it's going to be a different picture depending on what happens?
Yeah.
I don't want to bring up the charges, but
No,
they played
but
a big role in the sort of narrative this weekend.
I would be more convinced that Guardiola was leaving in 2025 if we didn't expect the Premier League charges to come to a head in 2025. I think it would be easier for him to walk away if there wasn't any noise around the charges. I think if, maybe, because the thing is, like, when they were charged by the Premier League in 2023, Guardiola did his press conference and said, more than ever, I want to stay. I don't think he would want to leave if, say, it came at the same time as City are suddenly hit with relegation down the divisions, because, he wants to future-proof this club and to, make sure that his legacy continues, and City's history isn't seen as, oh, well, they had Guardiola and they were amazing and then they went rubbish. So, if City are cleared of the most serious charges, I think that would be a decent opportunity for him to walk away at the end of next season. But if they are found guilty of them, I don't know if he's more likely then to stick around to try and...
See, I would say, and there's a lot of ifs and conditionals, but I would say that if they were punished, then he wouldn't have the finances or the squad. There'd be so many uncontrollables for him
Yeah,
to continue his legacy and continue at the highest level. And I think he's a manager who needs to be there. And if he's got this stance that he's held throughout his career, that he will honour his contracts and then leave and decide in good time. It could just
yeah,
be a shake hands and move on, and it could help City
yeah.
as well.
I,
But it's interesting what you're saying, that would tempt him to stay. It's
the,
it shows
yeah,
there's no easy answer.
no. And the thing is, I just think he's become like the biggest defender of City's reputation. You know, when he talks about net spend and all the other clubs who tried to get City banned from Europe, and like he has been, because he's the only one who does press conferences, he is like the biggest banger of the drum for City. And I think if he left City as soon as, say, they're found guilty of the most serious charges, which they deny, and are relegated, I think him leaving would be seen as him like jumping ship.
Hmm.
And I don't, and him not wanting to associate with the club anymore. And I don't think he would want people to think that of him. I don't think
Yeah,
he would want to be seen as a man who, you know, got out when times were hard or anything like that, even though it would otherwise be the natural end to
because it
his
feels right next summer. If there's a Club World Cup at the end of the season. If you can add another Premier League, potentially Champions League,
yeah,
follow it up with a chance at an international tournament that City will have never played before, that would be a nice time to leave, and you can potentially appoint. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but you could have a new manager preparing for the next season, and
yeah.
you can plan well
Mikel
ahead. But
Arteta. His Arsenal contract ends on the same day, so you never
well,
know.
I think the more likely thing is that they go and have a nice holiday together and
Yes,
don't
yeah, yeah. Have some
don't
nice
think
wine
about football.
and invite Klopp, of course, because they're amazing mates now.
This
Um,
is it, yeah.
but yeah, it does seem like 2025 would be a good time for him to go. But I do think that the charges do play a part in it, because I don't think he will, if the verdict doesn't go the way that City are expecting it to. I don't think he will want to be seen as somebody who is running away after all the talk he's done of staying and fighting.
Well, I say quick, a quick note on those charges in the Premier League, and I think the more City win, the more it puts the Premier League in a difficult and awkward position, because if City are found guilty, as they are confident, then they're going to have to strip titles and deduct points and all of this. And we've already seen calls from Arsenal pundits to say this decision needs to be made sooner. Now, obviously, it's in everyone's interest to do it properly and take as long as time as it needs. But the more City win, the more sort of retroactive punishment would have to take place if City are found guilty. So it, it's not a great weekend for the Premier League, and you can. It's not a good look on Richard Masters that he wasn't there at the Etihad, but you can understand why he wasn't.
Yeah, it's not a great. I don't know. I don't think there'll be any points deductions or anything. I think it's just as simple as, if City have misrepresented their finances, then they've got to be expelled from the league. That's like what it comes down to. And if they've not, then the Premier League have probably got to. There's got to be a string of resignations at senior executive level at whoever doesn't come out on top in this case. And you can't be clinging to, guilty and non-cooperation and things like that. It has to be the first and most important charges on the rap sheet where it comes down to. So it is awkward for the Premier League. It's awkward for City. Um, but that is the way it is. And it's not helped by people who sort of have no understanding of how these things work. Just saying, oh, they should settle it tomorrow. Why don't they show their evidence? Rah, rah, rah. It's just like it it needs to take as long as it needs to take. And, if some people don't value City's title because of that, then they're perfectly entitled to that opinion. I don't think anyone inside the Etihad yesterday will be of that opinion.
I don't think anyone inside the Etihad was thinking for 1 second about
No,
charges and
exactly.
titles being stripped and relegations. They were very happy that their team won the title.
Yeah, and that's why I can't really understand why Richard Masters didn't turn up. Because if he was trying to make a principled point, um, why did he turn up last year? that if you don't want to be seen handing the trophy to Man City, then don't be seen handing the trophy to Man City last year. And I know, they sent the Premier League chair, Alison Britton, who is technically outranking him, but Masters is the face of the Premier League and the one who is doing every interview and every select committee known to man, and always being asked about the charges. And was quite happy to do TNT on the final day at Arsenal, which was quite interesting.
Yeah, really rubbish reasoning for why he was not at City as well. Just we
Yes.
decided, it was like a Pep team talk explanation. Oh, we decided for this game.
Yeah. And so, it is awkward for all involved, and it's not going away. But that doesn't mean you should sort of shy away from it. Or, the problem for me with Masters not attending is that him not attending automatically gave people sort of the suggestion, oh, well, he's not attending because he doesn't want to be seen to be handing trophies to people who he thinks are guilty, which, again, see the last point, he attended last year. But also, nobody's seen the evidence that the Premier League have. The Premier League are confident in the evidence. City are confident in their evidence. Nobody's seen the evidence, so nobody knows it. But, we're at that point where whatever the outcome of the hearing is, everyone's already made their minds up. So I can guarantee you that if City are exonerated of the most serious charges, multiple people on the internet will say, well, if they weren't guilty, Richard Masters would have given them the trophy. And as the Premier League, as Richard Masters, surely you know this when you make the decision to go to Arsenal, and surely you don't want people to be speculating without evidence. So it was a bit irresponsible for me, I think, to
It was a bit of a lazy decision, wasn't it? I think
yeah.
just the easier way out, and it was
I mean, he might be absolutely adamant that he doesn't want to hand the trophy to City, but if he is, then what's changed in the last 12 months? Because the investigation had concluded then, and he was happy to do it then, and also sort of treated fine by City. I don't think he sort of got the big announcement to get the booze or anything like that. So yeah. And it is a strange situation. It's an unprecedented situation, but it is, a bed that the Premier League, and they would argue Manchester City, have made for themselves, and so have to lie in it.
this is it. And every time there's an interaction with City and the Premier League, and City win the Premier League, it's just thrust into the limelight. But yeah, I've seen it written, I've seen it sort of suggested that it's not fair on Arsenal that a decision hasn't been made before this season. But I would go back to the fact if Forest and Everton's decisions have taken 6 months to a year, or best part of the season, to judge and have appeals over one charge each, then it's going to take longer for 115.
And one charge each that they have accepted. They accepted the breach. So, City haven't accepted any of their breaches. So yeah, everyone would love for it to be sorted as soon as possible. But if it was sorted like yesterday, people would be saying, why has it been rushed in time for the end of the season? Why has it been, it's that there's always something. And I think a few people involved kind of have suggested that the Premier League made a mistake by laying down so many charges, because kind of it gives the opportunity to prepare as many defences as there are charges, and a lot of them are minor, really, in the grand scheme of things. Not sort of, they are serious, but are they enough to ensure X months of delay? Maybe not. So it's it is problematic for all involved, but there's so much water that is kind of not only under the bridge but over the bridge, and flooding the bridge and flooding the town and villages and the whole Premier League kingdom, that it's not going to be cleared up by this hearing. we're not going to have this hearing and everyone say, all right, well, I believe that fully, because, you know, we had the same with the Court of Arbitration for Sport and UEFA, and still people either haven't bothered to read that or don't understand it or willfully misrepresent it. You know, people believe what they want to believe. Most people believe City are guilty and that they'll get away with it. And in those, there's going to be a lot of people who won't be happy unless City are strongly punished. And there's going to be a lot of kind of people at City unhappy if they are cleared and they don't kind of get the recognition of innocence, having had the presumption of guilt from so many.
I knew when I said a quick word, it was not going to be a quick word. It's not an easy subject, is it? Let's leave it there. I did have a split second where Foden had scored that goal within a minute or two, and I was like, imagine this is 115 seconds into the game. This will be perfect. But no, it wasn't. They've got a chance to do that on the FA Cup final, which wouldn't be quite as sweet and wouldn't be as impressive as 12 seconds last year. But we will quickly turn our attention to that cup final. As I say, we'll have a joint podcast with our Manchester is Red colleagues, which I always say City fans will disagree with the name of that podcast, but you can catch that at the end of the week, and we'll be at Wembley to see if City can become the first team to do a double-double, which has never been done before. So as Guardiola continues to look for motivation to break records, he's got another one in a week's time after winning the Premier League. Will, as ever, have the best coverage throughout the week on the Manchester Evening News. If you can like and subscribe and leave a review of this podcast, we'd really appreciate it, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you normally find us. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy your week as 4 in a row champions, and we'll be back to look ahead to the FA Cup.